Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So today we are talking exclusively about eyeshadow, my favorite part of the makeup process. I love eyeshadow so much, and today I'm going to share with you all of my tips and tricks for blending, starting with prepping the eye, the actual eyeshadow application, what types of tools are best, and I'm going to show you kind of 2 to 3 different kinds of looks. This one is one of the 3, but we're going to start here in a minute with a blank face. So if you would like some tips and tricks on blending your eyeshadow and making it look very natural and just professional, keep on watching. Before we get too far into this video, make sure you are subscribed. If you're already subscribed, you can click the little notification bell so you know every time I upload a new video. Here we go. Okay, I've got my little notes here so I don't forget anything, but the first thing you're going to want to do to get a seamless eyeshadow blend is to prime your eyelids. So I'm going to go ahead and go in with what I normally use, but you guys can use whatever you want. You don't have to use this. This is the CoverGirl Lid Lock Up little primer here. You can just use concealer. And the purpose of this is to make sure that your eyeshadow does not crease right there on your eyelid crease. And to make sure that when you are wearing it for long periods of time, more than just a couple hours, that you don't get that little line in there. It also can cover up any eyelid veins you have, and it can just plain make your shadows be the boldest they can be. Now, bold doesn't necessarily mean bright colors. It can just mean show the full pigment of that shade. Now, some primers you will have to set, some primers you don't. By that, what I mean is some are a little more tacky or sticky, and if it is sticky, sometimes you need to put one color shadow that is the same color as your skin tone over the whole thing to set it in place so that you can blend shadows together over top of it. Otherwise, if you don't set the base first, it's just going to stick to that tacky base and it's not going to want to move or blend no matter what you do. You can also use concealer if you don't have a specific designated eyeshadow base, that's fine, but I would definitely say if you use concealer to set it with the shadow first before you start to blend in. So we're going to do that first, and we're going to do that with a brush, obviously. So I say obviously, but sometimes they'll come with, palettes will come with those little, it looks like a Q-tip that it's got a sponge on the end. You might as well just throw that out. That's really not going to give you any sort of good blend. You do need brushes to get a good blend. And there are so many different kinds of brushes. I have multiple containers of different types of brushes. Now, can you do a full look with one brush? Sure, no problem. I used to do that all the time before I got more into makeup, and if you want a really cheap one, this is a Wet n Wild brush here, and it's just a fluffy brush. I use this for pretty much my whole eye look, one shade go, but when you're doing multi-shades, you are more likely to be successful if you use multiple different types of brushes. So the main types of brushes I would say is like this, kind of a crease or a fluffy brush. Sometimes there are brushes like this that are angled. It can help with your eye shape. If you're going underneath the eye to smoke out the lower lash line, something short and stubby like this. Sometimes a flat brush for packing color on. I have 2 of these flat brushes because I'll show you guys. Sometimes I want to, with concealer, cut the crease. And then I don't really have, I kind of need to get more of a tapered or pencil brush, which means it tapers off and is a little thinner and you get more of a pinpoint. I have a very detailed little brush for fine little details. You can probably barely even see a little pink tip there, but that's more for illustrations and drawing details and dots and things like that versus the pencil brush. So you do not need all of these. I'm not going to use all of these today, but those are just some of the different types of brushes and things you might need them for. For cheap recommendations, I would say if you are not near a dollar store, you can't get those Wet n Wild ones. BH Cosmetics is very affordable. ColourPop And I have a lot of Morphe brushes just because I wait for them to go on sale. So when they're on sale, they're just a few dollars a piece if you can get them kind of in a set. So that's a lot of what I have in my personal collection. So I'm going to go in with a fluffy brush, like I said. Now what you want to do is make sure you have a clean brush. You can probably see there is color on this. It looks like I was using a brown last. So sometimes if you don't have a clean brush and you go in, there can still be some left over on this, and that will mix in with whatever color you actually intended on using. So you can do one of two things. I say one of two things because ultimately washing them is the best thing, but we don't always have time for that. So you can get one of these, this is called a dry makeup brush cleaner. It's just like a little color swatch, and it's just got like a little foam squishy piece in there, and you just do one of these, and it basically takes the color off and wipes it off between there. And then you can clean, this little thing comes out and you clean it occasionally. I think this was maybe like $3 or $4 cheap at Ulta. So you can do that before to make sure there's no colors on there. Or if you don't have one of these, you can just take a towel and do the same thing. Give it a little swirl, make sure there's no pigment from the last time you used it on that brush. These might seem like really basic things, but I, as a teacher, always want to break things down into like the most minuscule level, because as a teacher, I've learned where you assume that somebody knows something is generally where the problem goes. So if you know all of that, great, awesome. That just shows you knew more than you thought you did. All right, now you can use any colors you want for this, guys. You don't have to use these specific products. I'm just going in with what I have here, but any neutral colors are fine. I'm using the NYX Swear By It palette here first, just exclusively for this shade right here, just because that is very close to my natural skin tone. So I'm gonna go ahead and set my entire eyelid using that color to kind of set that eyeshadow primer base that we put down. And remember, when you tap in, a lot of shadows have fallout, so you either want to take your finger like this to tap it off. Sometimes you even have to be a little more aggressive and tap on the side to get rid of any excess that you don't need, so that you don't have fallout under the face. But again, I did start with a completely blank face, so that if there is some fallout, you can take a makeup wipe and easily wipe it away before your foundation, because that will mix in weird with your foundation if you have fallout and you leave it. Blanking out my eyelids like this is one of my favorite parts of doing eyeshadow, because it is sticking to that base and it just like is erasing and making all of the veins on my eyelids disappear, which I know veins are normal. It's not like, ew, gross, you don't take care of yourself because you can see your eye veins, but it's just satisfying to me. It's like a magic eraser. All right, so now that we've got a nice base on here, what we're gonna do is we're gonna start with a transition color. So a transition color means it is in between the colors that you're using around it. So typically for a good eyeshadow blend, you put like a medium in the middle color here in your crease, which if you're not sure where your crease is, you can take, if you have kind of like a tiny brush the end, be careful, don't push and push pressure, but you can find in your eyelid where kind of that crease is when you open and close your eye. That's where your transition is gonna go, right in your socket basically. That's gonna be a medium in between color. On the outer third corner here is usually where you put your darkest shade, and then here on the rest of your lid is where you do the lightest shade. So you can pre-plan your look a little bit if you look at the palette you have and kind of pick a lighter shade, a medium toned shade, and a darker shade. So for me today, for these shades, I'm going into this BH Cosmetics palette called Hangin' in Hawaii. It's got a lot of warm toned colors, as you can see, that I'm going to use here. You could certainly do the same technique with cool tones. I've really liked a lot of cool tone looks lately, but I'm just going to do this because it's, you know, summery warm tone. A lot of people like warm tones, so, but do what you want. So again, I'm going to find, okay, what's my medium toned, my light toned, and my deepest toned. So I'm probably going to use for my deepest tone down here, Honolulu. And so based on that, I'm going to say probably my lightest shade in this particular palette is Shaka up here. And that means probably my transition shade is going to be Coconut. So they're all kind of browns, but again, see, so there's the darkest diagonally is going to be my medium, and then up here is my lightest shade. And you don't have to pick from one palette either. You can mix and match and do whatever you want, but that's generally what you want to do to get them to blend, because they're all similar, like in the same family. If you want to mix two colors, like let's say brown and a pink or whatever, two shades that are not the same thing. You would want to find a shade that kind of has the undertones of one or the other color so that you could blend. It's almost like an ombre if you think of it that way, to get it to look seamless and not like very clear where one color stopped and one started. So pick whatever your mid shade color is. We're going with the same exact fluffy brush that we just used to set all of our eyelid with that translucent, I mean it's not translucent, but you know, it's gonna look translucent based on you choosing one that matches your skin tone. And then we're just gonna go right into that socket. I usually don't dip back in before I go to my other eye, just because I don't want to get too much. It's much easier to build up shadows than to fix it if you get too much. It's harder to go back. It's easier to add layers. You also want to think about how much pressure you're using. It's easier to blend if you are not pushing at all. You have very, very light, almost non-existent pressure. I mean, the brush is touching your skin, but that's really it. It should feel very light and feathery. The other thing you have to take into consideration is your eye shape. Now for me, I usually take this transition shade pretty darn far up close to my brow. That is because I have hooded eyes, meaning when I open my eyes, if I take it up, you'll actually be able to see it. If I were to only leave it in that crease, it would be gone. You would not even see what I was doing. So you may have a different eye shape than I do. I do not have a lot of experience on working on other people's eye shapes that are different than mine, but I'm sure you can find videos if you have more round eyes or almond eyes or things like that that would talk more about the specific placement of where to put it on the eye for your specific eye shape. But in this video, I'm just focusing more on the technique of blending it on the skin. So that's pretty good for our transition shade there. You can see I've left it completely naked underneath that. And I'm gonna go now to the outer corner. This is our darker shade. So for the darker color, I'm using a smaller brush. For me personally, I like to start with a small, tighter brush just to place it, and then also choose something else fluffy to blend it out with. That's just my personal technique. So I'm gonna show you side by side. Here, this brush is the one that we used for the transition shade, and then next to it, just so you can compare the shape here, this darker brown brush, not the white-haired one, is the one we're gonna use to apply that darker shade. So I'm going with the darkest of the three shades I chose, which in this case was Honolulu, tapping off my brush, and I'm just going to put it in the outer third of my eye here. You can kind of think of quadrants of your eye, you know, this being half, so a little less than half just here on the outside. And some people want a very graphic, sharp angled look, so you could make this a V. I'm gonna do a little bit more of a softer, more blown out look. And you're gonna do this from the lash line, and you are gonna carry it up. It does actually go all the way up into the crease, into that section of transition shade. It might look a little bit harsh initially, but we're gonna go back and blend it out. So once again, I personally like a smaller brush because I can put a very small amount of shadow on and decide if, okay, that's plenty and I just need to blend it out, or that's not quite enough. I really would like to go back and add a little bit more. So much easier to add more than it is to take it away. So now what you need is a clean brush, okay? Or if you wanted to wipe off one you already used because you have limited supplies, that's fine too. But you're gonna wanna take a clean brush, and you're gonna want something that is a blending brush. So here is an example of a blending brush, very fluffy, kind of like the first one we used. This one is from Sigma Beauty and is specifically an E25 blending brush. So what you're gonna do is where you just applied that darker shade and you took it all the way up here to the transition shade, there is nothing at all on this brush. You don't wanna apply any more product. You're just gonna use it with, again, little to no pressure, and go where the darker shade meets the transition shade in the crease and do tiny little buffing motions. Now, some people like more of a swipe motion, some people like a circular motion. I personally like swiping. I think that's more preference than anything else. But you want to keep it blended within where you placed your transition shade. The other thing I like to blend at this point is the outside of the eye here where the shadow ends. Just really blowing that out and making sure it's nice and blended. If it goes further than you want, like you're like, oh my gosh, I blended it all the way out to here, again, that's another reason why you might want to do your eyes first, so you can then clean it up with a makeup brush or your foundation and really just have the shadow placed only where you would like it. So now we've got the transition shade as well as the darker shade, which gives your eye just a little more dimension. I think the darker shade makes a huge difference, at least for me personally, but you can still also see that this section has nothing on it yet, so that's where we're gonna go next. So for this, I'm using my lightest shade, and I'm going in with a flat brush. It looks like a similar rounded shape as the other two, but when I turn it sideways, it is flat compared to what we used before. What we used before is fluffy all the way around. I'll put them up side by side just so you can kind of see the difference between this one's fluffy all the way around and one is flat. I'm gonna find something similar to that. Again, you can make it work with the fluffy brush. I just think you can get more precise with the flat one. So you're gonna go in with your lightest shade, tap the brush. Have you heard me say that enough times? Tap off the brush. I read somewhere in some teacher magazine thing that I was reading that it takes students 17 times of hearing new information before it actually sticks and they remember it. And that was just like an astounding number to me. So sorry if it seems repetitive, but I want to make sure it sticks for you guys. So you're going to take that flat brush and just on the section where where it's still, you know, your eyelid color, you don't have any color there, you're going to fill in and connect to where you put that darker color. And you're just going to fill in. The other reason I like the flat brush is because I think it's easier to get on this inner portion of your eye. Some people like a lighter inner corner than this. You could do that if you wanted. You don't have to, but you can see it almost just looks all like one color now. I mean, it's a little bit of an ombre where it's darker on the outsides, but it's pretty well blended at this point. There's a couple things you could do just to enhance it even more. If you think your outer corner got a little lost when you added that lighter color, you can go back in again if you want, just to darken up the corners. It's totally up to you. After you've done your foundation and concealer, if you want it to look smokier, you can add more of that darker color underneath here, and then whatever inner glider color you used in here, totally up to you. If you wanted to not have it be all matte, you could have a little bit of a metallic. I'm going to show you how to do that. So you can see where the ombre is here in the outer third corner of the eye here. So if you wanted to, you could take a shimmer. I've got several in this particular palette, and I'm going to use this shade up here called Hula. A lot of these shimmers work best with your fingers, so I'm just going to swirl it on my finger. And you could just tap some on the center of your lid there if you wanted. And I'll close my eyes so you can see the difference between the one that I just barely patted a little bit of shimmer there in the center. It just brings light to it a little bit more than the one that's all matte. So you could certainly do that. Sometimes shimmers are your friend too if you have not blended as well as you want and you just can't get that to really ombre out. sometimes you can use a little shimmer on the eye like that to cover the seam, if you will, between the two colors, because then you can't see that it's not blended underneath that shimmer that's there. The other thing you could do now, if you wanted to, would be a cut crease. So I'm going to show you how to do that. And these are all just options. You could just stop at the matte if you wanted to and be done. But I'm just showing you a couple other things for ideas, I guess, to give you options. So another flat brush, if you want to cut the crease, and I'm going to do a half cut crease. So basically a cut crease is where you're going to cut out this part. So you still see everything you did up here, but you are done down here. It gives you a little more of a cut, precise line. I'm going to do what's called a half cut crease. So I'm going to only cut half of it because I don't want to get rid of that darkness I did on the outside. So on a flat brush, I'm just going to take a little bit of my concealer and put it on this brush. And then you're literally like concealing, whitening out this part of your lid. Now we wouldn't have put that lighter color shadow down if we knew we were doing this. Just to let you know, you would just do the transition shade and then you would do the darker shade. You would not do the lighter shade yet. And then you're just going to follow your natural crease here till about the halfway point of your eye. That's about where I applied that shimmer. You're going to do that on both sides. So this makes it, you can probably see, so that that lightest color is going to be a little more distinct. There's intentionally a little bit of a break or a divide in your crease. It's not 100% blended, but some people like that. They think it makes it look a little bit better, but you don't just leave the concealer tacky like this. You do have to set it. And usually when you do a cut crease like this, I mean, you can set it with any color, guys. There's no exact 100% you must do this rules, but a lot of people will set it with a similar shade to what they would have set their eyeshadow primer with, like a very light, similar to your skin tone color. So to show you that, I'm going to go back in with my NYX Swear By It color palette, and I'm going to cover that concealer I just cut out my crease with, this section where you laid the concealer. And you set it with your skin tone shade that you use to set your eyeshadow primer or your concealer. Then if you still think it's not really blended here, obviously from the top to the bottom, like the transition shade to the cut crease now, the whole point is that there's a cut here, but you do kind of want it blended here between your colors, not necessarily blended this way, but blended this way, if that makes any sort of sense whatsoever. So you can take your little brush with your darker color and just very faintly and lightly go right here to blend it out and make it seamless. Then what I like to do is I'll take a little bit of either highlighter or a shimmer shade. I'm using that Hoola that I showed you when I showed you the shimmer on my finger of how to kind of cheat a little blend there. And I like to take that on a little brush and put it on the inner corner and a little under the brow bone. You don't have to do that. You can do whatever you want. It's totally up to you. That's just my personal preference. And that's it. You could put liner over this if you want. You could put brown liner. You could put black liner. You could use black eyeshadow instead of brown on the outside. You can play with your color story. Some people do this with green, yellow, orange. I mean, this is just something neutral and natural to get you started with blending and practice a little bit more. But you can do whatever you want with it from here. So I'm going to go ahead off camera and finish the rest of my makeup just to show you how I would do the rest of my makeup to make it look a little natural. Okay, and here is the finished look with the rest of my makeup. I did go ahead and put a really natural little lash on here. These are the Ardell Professional brand natural lashes. These are in style 106. They are black. You could certainly do without, but I like these. They're a little shorter on the inner corner and they flare out a little bit more on the outside, which I think helps not only lift the eyes, but it also accentuates that darker eyeshadow we work to blend on the outside and give it more dimension. So I do have a video on applying false lashes on my channel. If you're interested in that, I'll leave it linked down below in the description box. So yeah, that is the video, guys. I hope you learned something about how to blend your eyeshadow a little bit better today. If you have any other questions or would like any sort of tutorials or tips on any other step of your makeup, or if you just think maybe something I said wasn't still clear about that eyeshadow and I can clear up any of that for you further, please leave me down in the comments section your thoughts. I'd be happy to share whatever I can with you. That being said, if you have not already, please make sure you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I upload new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. If you found this video helpful, share it with your friends. Hopefully they can get something from it as well. Thank you so much for watching and making it to the end of this video, and I will see you again in the next one. Bye.